How far is Blender from Maya plus Animbot when it comes to character animation?
Yeah, so I actually don't really have much experience in Blender. I think Maya and Blender can do the similar things in terms of animation. It's definitely different kind of layout. From what I've heard, Maya is a little more user friendly in terms of animation specifically, but I've heard that like once you get used to Blender, it's very useful. And Blender is free, so it has that going for it. But I do feel like I could definitely see Blender one day becoming the industry standard, especially since that movie Flow that was made with Blender, won the Oscar. So I think that really is going to get studios to start taking it seriously.
Are the 12 principles of animation still relevant in 3D?
Oh, absolutely. We're constantly thinking of the 12 principles. We're doing whatever we can to bring the appeal of 2D animation into 3D. And 3D wouldn't exist without 2D being there first. So, yeah, it's super important, every principle.
Imagine you're working on a feature-length animated adventure film, think DreamWorks or Pixar, that combines both 2D and 3D elements. Which scenes would be easier to animate in 2D and which are easier in 3D?
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I think if they're both 2D and 3D elements, I'm guessing it would make more sense to have the 2D elements be more, like characters and whatnot, and the 3D elements maybe be more like environment based. Um, you'll even in like a lot of 2D movies, they'll sometimes use 3D elements for environments or vehicles. Things that are either more stationary or more have to be more like structurally consistent. So kind of utilizing the 3D for things that need to be more on the structural, sturdier side, and then 2D for stuff that's more organic. But you can really do both for either thing. I think that both are just different art forms, and it all depends at the end of the day of like how you use them. But I think both prove to be very powerful art forms, and yeah, and at the end of the day, both are just different mediums, and it just depends on how you use them.
Name some of the most frustrating mistakes of the past or things you wish you had known many years ago.
Yeah, I think when I started in animation, I wish that I asked more questions. I think I really kept to myself a lot and tried to figure things out on my own when I didn't realize that I was surrounded by a bunch of people with a lot of talent and wisdom. So I would say I would recommend to everyone to just like absorb things like a sponge, ask questions, ask ask millions and millions of questions just so that you're learning something new every day. I think that's really the secret to it, and I'm still learning things to this day. And I think that that's what really keeps you fresh and keeps you growing as an artist forever.
Is animating on twos and threes harder than on ones?
Um, certain aspects of it are easier, certain aspects are more difficult. It really is just a different way of thinking when it comes to animating. On Gaslight District, we've been animating on twos and threes, etc. And we think a lot more about the posing, about stylizing things and stylizing the movement. When you're on ones, you have spacing and timing to kind of give the feel of movement, but when you're starting to like have control over the frame rate, that gives you this other whole dimension of control over the feeling of movement, and you can utilize that. You can slow down a frame rate to make something feel choppier. You can speed up that frame rate to make it feel smoother. So essentially, it just gives you this whole new tool to work with. Um, Something also that we don't have to worry about when animating on twos and threes is motion blur. So really, it's sort of like what you see in Maya is what you get in the final product. So there's definitely different trade-offs. I don't know if one is necessarily easier or harder than the other, but they're each different ways of thinking when it comes to animation.
How much error in 3D animation is acceptable?
I guess it really depends on what studio or who you're asking. I personally, I find that I'm a bit of a perfectionist, but I find that I also miss a lot of mistakes in my work. And I often don't think it matters too much because I think if you get the overall feeling of what you're trying to do with your characters, with your story, I don't think the minor mistakes matter that much. Granted, those mistakes can take people out of something if they're too noticeable or distracting. But I think in this sort of, I think we're sort of seeing this resurrection or this renaissance of indie animation, and I think it would be cool to kind of embrace errors and mistakes to kind of bring back that human element to animation, because it's so easy when working on a computer for things to look, very just like perfect and computery as opposed to like handcrafted 2D animation. So I don't know. I personally think it would be cool to welcome little mistakes here and there, but I think everyone's opinion on that is different, and I think the bigger a studio becomes, I think the more they want to cover up all those mistakes and make things look clean and pristine or whatnot.
And today's episode is sponsored by Xola, a video game commerce company. Follow the link in the description to find out how you can launch, monetize, and scale your video games worldwide with no upfront costs using Xola's comprehensive suite of tools and services.
Is artificial intelligence affecting character animation jobs nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely is starting to affect art and will affect art in the future. I've already been hearing things of, certain jobs getting replaced and whatnot. And I think it is one of those things that I don't think it's going to go away, but we're going to have to figure out a way to regulate it and coexist with it. And I think we need laws around it to protect artists from losing their jobs, and find a way where people can use it as a tool and not to replace any jobs. I think this technology was introduced to society before we were ready for it, as most, that's how most things go, I would say. And so now we have to kind of figure out how we're going to exist with it. I think that human made art is always going to be important and is always going to be better. I do see potential in AI, but it really is about regulating it and using it as a tool and not as a replacement for human creativity.
Did you ever have to animate not safe for work stuff, be it for money or personal development or any other reason?
Um, Sort of, yeah. I mean, I used to work for a company called Squanch Games. I worked on a game called High on Life, and there it was definitely some of that like raunchy, crude humor, and so I did have to animate stuff that was a little on the not safe for work side. I wouldn't say anything like too crazy because all like aliens and wacky cartoon characters, but it is definitely a different kind of work than I'm used to working on. I kind of prefer the safe for work stuff just because I like stuff that can making stuff that can be enjoyed by everyone. Granted, I think the stuff we make at Glitch definitely has its certain jokes that maybe might be for slightly older audiences, but still kind of that general audience kind of vibe. And I think that's what I gravitate to the most.
What methods best facilitate smooth transitioning from 3D software like Maya or Blender to a game engine like Unreal or Godot?
Right. Yeah, and that's sort of a big factor in what we do because, yeah, we animate in Maya, it gets rendered in Unreal Engine, and we have to make sure that everything we do can be transferred in a way that works. And, we luckily have brilliant tech people at Glitch that help us out a lot with that. But just because of the nature of this method, of this pipeline, errors do pop up and we often have to look into them. So I think it's just about making sure that what you're doing and how you're doing it is something that will work in engine. And like I think like checking your work in the engine very often, testing things out to see what works and what doesn't. Um, I think that's really the goal to that is just like testing often because you should take advantage of the fact that you're rendering in a real-time engine where you can, see your animation with like all the lighting and everything pretty immediately. That's not a luxury that I got when I worked at, other studios like Blue Sky, where you had to wait for it to be rendered on a render farm before you could see it with all the lighting and everything. But this sort of gives us that advantage of seeing the final product or something resembling the final product pretty immediately. And but yeah, the trade-off is that not everything will transfer smoothly from Maya to Unreal. And there's a lot of different details that I could go into on that. But yeah, I think one main thing is definitely testing often is a very good way to prevent disaster later on.
Does everyone manually animate clothing and hair, or are those typically simulated?
It depends. Yeah, we have the ability to simulate things in Maya, and then we can sort of, bake that down and then delete keys, adjust keys, etc. So we do utilize a bit of dynamics and simulation, but in a way where the artists still have control over that and can tweak it to make sure that it looks the way they want it to.
Name the most bizarre thing you had to animate at Glitch and how you approached it.
Oh gosh. I mean, there's so many bizarre things I have had the pleasure to animate. I think one of them was like Bubble coming out of Pomni's mouth. That definitely was an interesting challenge of just trying to shape her mouth around Bubble in a way that didn't break the rig. So it felt like a lot of cheating and a lot of just brute forcing it until it looked right. But I had fun with it, and honestly, I love challenging puzzles like that. I think those are the most fun things to work on. Just things where you wonder how the heck am I going to animate that? How is this going to work? And just sitting down and figuring it out.
Digital Circus Episode 7. When?
I cannot answer that, but stay tuned. You're in for some amazing stuff.
Kevin Temmer, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, this was so much fun.